Get ready for the best holiday sale of the year. For a limited time, enjoy 50% off annual news subscriptions at inforum.news/gift. That's right, 50% off unlimited access to local news so you can stay informed and connected to your community. It's a gift you'll want to give yourself. This incredible holiday offer ends December 22nd, so don't miss out. Subscribe now at inforum.news/gift.
Welcome to Plain Talk. This is the last podcast for Plain Talk for 2023. I'm going to be off all next week, so I'm hoping. First of all, I guess we'll start right there. Hey, I hope you all have a wonderful holiday. Maybe you're listening to this over the holidays, sharing this with your family, gathering around the Bluetooth speaker to listen. Yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that.
So, Rob, you're not going to do like a best of episode next week of the podcast, like splice something together about the best moments?
You know what? Scroll back through your Spotify list and listen to what you want to listen to. I'm off. I'm not doing that. Okay, so we're gonna have a very good show. Chad and I are not gonna talk about baseball at the beginning, although Chad's very excited because his team signed Yamamoto and the Yankees did not, so I am sad and he's happy.
Rob, it's good to be rich. Maybe someday the Yankees can make it to be a big market team again.
Yeah. Ouch. I don't have a rebuttal. We're just going to move on to our guest, Thomas Beadle. He's the treasurer of the state of North Dakota, who's looking on. Thomas, I joked before we started that my first question for Thomas was going to be, do you like baseball or do you hate America? And are you a baseball fan, Thomas, or do you unpatriotic?
I'm a casual baseball fan.
Casual
not
baseball
as much
fan.
As you guys are. I grew up. So when I was in elementary school, I was born down in Tennessee, so I grew up as a Braves fan.
Sure.
That was the market that we were in, so I watched a lot of that, and then graduated to a Twins fan when I moved to North Dakota in elementary school or in middle school. So I keep watching them. I really once September October hits, that's really when I start tuning in. Otherwise, there's a few too many games. But football's my jam.
I'm trying to figure out how much time Twins fans spend watching baseball in October. I don't.
Not often.
Yeah.
And so it makes for a great pivot to the football season.
Listen, Chad, don't shake your head. If you're going to kick me, I'm going to stick the knives in the Twins. That's what Yankees fans do.
But who are the Yankees playing in the playoffs this year? All
right, shut up.
I believe the Twins did win a series.
Only because the Yankees weren't there to defeat them.
I'm just saying your timing is terrible on that.
Every time the Yankees are in a losing streak, I look ahead in the schedule to when we're going to be playing the Twins so that we can feel good about ourselves again.
Well, I respect that even in the audio medium, you do have the Yankees hat going right now.
I do.
You're repping your team in the down years. That's good. I respect it.
Hey, I'm thick and thin. So Thomas, you're running for re-election. Let's actually do the interview about what we brought Thomas on for. Maybe we'll get to it. Are you? I was just about to ask you. Are you running for re-election? Of course, you're running for re-election. You just announced it. Tell us about that. First term in the gig, and now you're looking forward to another one, hopefully.
Absolutely. So it's been a really quick 3 years so far. I mean, it's coming on January 1. It'll be 3 years that I've been in this role. And it's flown by. I can't thank my staff and my team at the treasurer's office enough. They've really made this easy and fun. It's been enjoyable to come into work and work with these people every day because they're curious, they're adventurous. They've got it's a young, dynamic office, so we're constantly having babies and little kids in. My finance director just got back from maternity leave, and so we've got baby E in the office right now. So it keeps it all fun and lighthearted, and I love it. But it's a very technical job. I mean, we were just having a conversation. I was just a couple minutes late because we're trying to figure out how to update our online distribution platform system so that it can sync better with our website, so that we can have fewer touch points on the back end, so we can make sure all the data is out there translated cleanly for people that want to go see it. So we're trying to elevate some of the things that we're doing, and so there's we've gotten a lot of stuff done, but there's a lot more that we can do going forward. And so it's been great, but it's gone quick, and so there's still a lot more stuff on the to-do list that we got to get done. So yeah, I'm excited to jump in and hopefully have the voters' trust for another 4 years.
Thomas, anytime somebody's running for re-election, the thing that goes through my head is, what have you done and what do you want to do? So if somebody says, what have you accomplished in those first 3 years in office? What are the things you're most proud of? And what are those things that you're going to focus on? Because I think your point that it's a technical job, it's not really a public-facing political office all that often. So can you just tell the listeners sort of what you've accomplished, what you hope to accomplish in the next 4 years?
Yeah, we try not to be public facing because usually if our name's getting out, that means something went wrong and money went to the wrong place. So we try to not have that happen. So yeah, some of the stuff that we've been working on, I mean, we've made some adjustments to the reporting platform, things like Prairie Dog Money. We make sure that we're able to collect and receive all those reports so that people can go on there and see how cities are spending it. So we're trying to improve that process, rather than it just kicking out a CSV file that looks real technical and you have to learn to sort. We're in the process of updating some of that stuff, so it's not only is the data there, but you can actually understand the data. And so we're trying to make that stuff more intuitive. We've been able to go through working with ITD. We're trying to set up and improve some of our systems. A lot of it is stuff behind the scenes, things like our tax distribution and outstanding check system, TDOC, talking to Cognos and some of the recon. It's this IT stuff trying to make stuff better. We have got a huge lift to make some of that stuff move even smoother, but we've made some progress there. But some of the stuff that people might actually be able to recognize is we've worked really close with our legislative partners to try to step up the game when it comes to things like the state investment board. I'm one of 2 statewide elected officials on there. It's myself and the lieutenant governor that oversee the state investment board. We've worked with the legislature to improve reporting requirements, to increase transparency on how our proxy voting is happening, to adjust our investment policy statements so that we can ensure that our fund managers are abiding by our requirements to do business with companies that support Israel. That was one of the things that we passed this last session is if you have anti-BDS language, if you're boycotting, divesting, or sanctioning Israel, we're not going to do business with you. We want to make sure that we have that relationship strong. Similarly, we had language around sustainability in our investment policy statement. We interpreted that as sustainability of the fund. Our fund managers were interpreting that as chasing some environmental goals. So we made sure to change that, clean that language up so that if you're trying to divest from fossil fuels and not do business in North Dakota, again, we don't want to do business with you. So a lot of it was ramping some of that stuff up, changing a lot of our governance policies, taking us to the next level, and then also bringing in internal investment management so that we can manage our funds ourselves instead of being as reliant on outside fund managers, and then also investing into the state of North Dakota, which is something that we've been rolling out through the Legacy Fund, thanks to our legislative partners as well. So we're really working on a lot of that stuff. We've started that process. Took us a long time to get some of the investment managers, our staff internally hired, onboarded, ready, get their back office systems in place. We created some subcommittees on the State Investment Board. I chair the investment subcommittee that's able to do a dive in, look at a lot of this stuff in detail, and then roll it out in a little quicker fashion with some public-private relationships. So we have some private sector investment folks that help advise our investment board as well. So really kind of rolling a lot of that stuff out. It's early stages on a lot of it, but there's a lot more to do. And then, we're also launching, we're in the process of hiring a vendor right now for a cash management study holistically through the state. Lots of different agencies have a ton of little funds, pockets of cash all over the place. Normally it's DOT. They've got construction for a big project coming up, legislature appropriated to them. Well, where's that money sitting before it actually needs to go out to pay a vendor? Same with, water has similar funds like that. And then we have, double stabilization funds. So we have the budget stabilization fund that backfills general fund. So if there's ever a massive crash, we have money sitting there to help replace that revenue in general fund. Well, we also have the foundation aid stabilization fund doing the same thing for K-12. The general fund is what pays for K-12, so we're effectively double stabilizing some of those funds, and that puts $425 million sitting off to the side as a rainy day fund that we don't necessarily need. And so we're figuring out how we can improve that cash management. And then working with Bank of North Dakota, we're in the process of launching the Enrich program. So it's between myself, the DPI office, and Bank of North Dakota. It's a financial literacy and education tool that comes through the National Association of State Treasurers, where I'm the vice president of, working to improve our financial literacy and education options that are not only for our K-12 students, but also for citizens at large. So we're going to try to get some of that rolling so we can improve people's financial standing, or at least their comfort level in talking finances. So that's some of the stuff that we're working on and we've done so far.
Thomas, what's evident from that answer, detailed as it was, is you have a real passion for this job. I mean, it really feels like you found a spot. You're doing it. I mean, it's I don't know. I mean, that's something that's evident to me. You took kind of an interesting path, political path into this, and I say that. I mean, you were a state lawmaker before, and then you opted to run for statewide office. That's not unusual. But during the primary process, your opponent in the Republican primary was another Republican state lawmaker, former state lawmaker, Dan Johnston, and he had the endorsement of then President Donald Trump, which is, I mean, unusual that the president of the United States would reach that far down the ballot and endorse. He had the endorsement of other kind of Trump world figures. Mike Lindell, endorsed in the race. That's a tough thing. I mean, North Dakota is obviously a very pro-Trump state. You ran that campaign and you won pretty decisively. So, I mean, as we're kind of looking over the political landscape, I mean, talk about that a little bit. I mean, that was kind of a remarkable thing to come out of that election cycle, that you won despite Donald Trump endorsing your Republican primary opponent.
Yeah, and that, I mean, 2020 was weird for a million different reasons with the pandemic and everything else. I mean, it was a whole weird situation. We weren't able to go through the normal convention process, so everything was primary, which is fine. A lot of states do it that way. It was just different for us, so it was a whole new way of trying to get out and connect with people. My race became kind of a proxy battle between a couple of other statewide electeds in North Dakota, kind of a Burgum versus Cramer sort of deal, and the Trump endorsement, I think, came out of Kevin's camp, and so then governor's camp, and I had just about every other statewide elected, whether it was Wayne Stenjum, most of our PSC, all the leadership in the legislature were supporting me, and so it was really kind of a weird battle. But as you kind of explained, my background in the legislature, I was on the appropriations committee. I wasn't known as being a bomb thrower in our legislature, and that's one of the reasons why my race kind of became a battle. Years ago, when I first got elected, my grandfather, who served in the legislature in the 60s and 70s, he told me, Thomas, there's workhorses and there's show horses. You got to kind of figure out what you want to be. And the show horses, they might be the ones that are out there. They're throwing bombs. They're making headlines. They're doing all this stuff. The workhorses, they're working in committee, getting stuff done, trying to get results. And I was never the show horse. That wasn't, where I'm comfortable. Throwing the bombs unnecessarily just because we got to own the libs isn't something that, really appealed to me. I can tell you 50 different reasons for why a lot of these Biden administration policies have been terrible. And I've signed dozens of letters with some of my fellow state financial officers pushing back on a lot of stupid regulations that we're trying to get them to roll back that are better for our stakeholders and better for our financial investors. But I'd rather work in the details and work in the weeds. And so, in 2020, my focus was, let's protect taxpayer dollars. Fiscal responsibility matters. We have a fiduciary obligation to a lot of different funds, a lot of different stakeholders. Our teachers fund for retirement, our public employees retirement system, our common schools trust fund. There's just tons and tons of areas that we impact, and we have to recognize that our obligation is to someone else, and that we're protecting and being custodians of their assets, and us throwing bombs just for the sake of throwing bombs isn't the way to be. And so I think that's kind of that was my focus was let's stick to the details. Let's get stuff done. Let's actually work for people, as opposed to, go after some of the red meat issues. And, fortunately for me, that kind of carried the day. And we were able to explain, hey, some of these technical offices, you don't need to go after every, big divisive issue and try to make that a thing, because that's not what we do. We are really not.
Well, that was one of the odd things in the primary, is that abortion randomly became an issue in the treasurer's race. Which, I mean, I'm not saying that issue is not important. It's just not relevant to a race about a very technical office that has nothing to do with abortion.
But But I think we should ask the question here, Rob. I mean, so in 2020, abortion was a key issue in the primary, and Chris Cramer, you mentioned Kevin. Chris endorsed your Democratic opponent as well over social issues. So the question I have for you, Thomas, you've now been in office for 3 years. How much work have you done on abortion in the treasurer's office?
Our office doesn't touch that issue. It's surprising. We've
shocking.
never done anything. I mean, we've focused on a lot of stuff, like I said, with federal regulations that have been passed down. I've worked with my counterparts in Utah and West Virginia to push back on different rules that tried to prohibit financing for gun manufacturers. We've pushed back on limitations on that and some of the tracking of some of those financial instruments. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I've joined with my Republican counterparts and my conservative counterparts in other states to make sure that access to capital continues to flow to GOP conservative operations who are running risks of being debanked over the last couple of years. So, I mean, I've stood in support of that, but there's not been those social issues don't really touch when we're dealing with 911 fees and remitting them back out to counties and cities or airline taxes and getting it back out to our airport authorities. I mean, we collect dozens of taxes and fees that come up from the counties, and then we put them into the fund that they need to go into. I mean, there's over 900 funds across the state of North Dakota, and it's our job to manage and make sure that the interest is allocated to those appropriately. That's not a big partisan bomb throwing social issue kind of world that we're dealing with day to day.
Well, and Thomas, you said a few different things here that I don't necessarily agree with, but I'm also sitting here thinking, this is what I want. This is what I want my public service folk to be doing. I want them to focus on the job they're doing, not throwing bombs. With that being said, we live in a bomb-throwing world. You've announced that you're running you're running for re-election. Have you determined if you're going to go through the convention process, if you're going to go straight to the primary? Has that been part of your calculus up to this point? Because it is, I mean, there's some landmines through this process, even to become the Republican nominee again, potentially.
Yeah, I mean, there is, and it's an open conversation. I mean, I'll be traveling to all the district conventions here starting in January when they kick up, and try to hit as many as I can. I know I've talked with my other counterparts and the other statewide officers that are going to be running, and sometimes we have more than one on one night, so it becomes difficult to go from Castleton to Harvey in one day, or within an hour of each other. But so we'll make some of those. We'll be at all the district conventions that we can hit. We're working and meeting with all the delegates and everything. I love the convention process. My first convention was in 1988 when I was one, and I've been going to a lot of them since then, and pretty consistent. So I've always loved that process, but I also love democracy and the primary process and campaigning into summer where you can get all those parades and everything else is something that I enjoy as well. So, I mean, we'll be ready to run through November.
Thomas, what sort of things do you expect to be an issue in the upcoming campaign? And you mentioned some things that are kind of down. I don't want to say they're down in the weeds, but they're important. I mean, they are important because they are, for instance, if we're trying to make a statement about guns or restrict access to guns, should that be done through financial regulation? Well, I mean, I don't think so. I mean, to me, that's a debate for the public policy realm. If we don't like guns or we want to tamp down access to guns or something, then we need to have that debate in legislatures. We have, in the context of the United States Constitution, not trying to come in through the back door and inhibit either something's illegal or it's not. And if we don't want it to be legal, we should have that debate in the legislature. If we want it to be legal, then Americans should be able to use their money to buy it and shouldn't be inhibited by big banks. Anyway, I think those issues are important. What sort of things are you expecting to come up in the campaign trail? I mean, you started off our first question. You gave us a laundry list of things you've been doing, things you've been working on. What do you expect voters to be focused on in the coming year?
Well, I think voters, for the most part, especially for a technical office like this, they want to make sure that they can just trust the process and that things are getting done the way they're supposed to get done. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we need to work better on with other agencies. We've found some gaps in terms of communication to be able to provide as detailed transparency. For example, if you go into OMB's checkbook process, which is our data feeds in with that, I mean, you can search it all really well, but it's tough to find exactly what you're looking for sometimes because there's just so much detail there. And so, is there ways that we can update that process, whether it's through PeopleSoft or our vendors or whatever? So, but that's not usually what I think the voters are going to be asking about. I mean, there's a lot we can do. There's a lot we can get in the weeds on. The stuff that I think will really get the headlines or get some people's attention, just based off of what people have been reaching out to me for, is really this ESG issue. And this is something that's affecting everyone in the country. It's something that's been going on for the last couple of years. I mean, when President Biden took office, he had appointed John Kerry as climate czar. And one of the first things that happened there was mid-2021, he had a meeting in Wall Street and started talking about changing, getting some of the banks to start putting their money where their mouth is when it comes to some of the sustainability. And so that kind of led the process of these ESG scorecards happening where, we were listed, North Dakota was listed as a moderately negative risk on ESG factors because of our reliance on traditional energy, and whether we're actually a moderate risk from an investment standpoint, I think is something that I can, disagree with them vehemently on. And so it's just making sure that there's transparency, and especially in that financial process, focus on fiscal returns, focus on returns to shareholder and shareholder value. Don't focus on chasing some other political goal and trying to keep people accountable that way. I mean, you have a couple of big firms, BlackRock, Vanguard, they collectively own 5 to 10% of just about every company across the country because they're just so big. BlackRock has $9 trillion assets under management. If we think the $9 billion in the legacy fund is huge, they have $9 trillion. That's a scale we can't even think of in North Dakota. But they own everything. And that influence that they have into the corporate board decisions, all that sort of stuff, is something that us as state financial officers have been trying to push back on because we are trying to provide a balance and a check to, again, we need to focus on our pension funds. We need to focus on our common schools trust funds, getting that return to pay for the benefits that we have to pay for or the services we have to pay for. And we can't sacrifice 2, 3, 4% return in order to chase a political goal over here, because that's not where our duty lies. And so it's really kind of talking about that and making people aware of that issue that's going on so that we can provide for all the services we need to provide for that our funds need to generate revenue for.
Thomas, one of my favorite parts about co-hosting this podcast is while I'm having a conversation with somebody will say something that's of interest to me, and I get to follow up and dive deep regardless if other people care about it or not. You talked about, speaking in the weeds, the cash management study. And so, I mean, basically what you're talking about there, and correct me if I'm wrong, is we have a bunch of money that's potentially sitting in a checking account earning no interest. And what you want to do is
but not as much as it could.
Yeah. So you want to look at all those sort of stagnant, low interest funds. And if there's a way that we can use our money better, is that essentially what the purpose of this study is? To earn more interest, keep taxes low? Can you just sort of explain what that looks like?
Absolutely. Every dollar of interest we earn to help support our programs is one less dollar of tax revenue we have to rely on to pay for those programs. So we want to try to maximize those returns as best as we can. We're unique in North Dakota, as everyone knows and loves. There's a lot of things that make North Dakota unique and great. One of the things that we have that is different from every other state is a state-owned bank. And so we already do some cash management there because they're the bank of record for us as a state. So all of our general funds is over at the Bank of North Dakota. A lot of agency funds have different accounts over at the Bank of North Dakota. There's some that are outside of there. So when the Bank of North Dakota receives that, we have checking accounts, we got money market savings accounts there. They all pay us a different level of interest. I tongue-in-cheek joke with the president of the Bank of North Dakota that I'd love to see that interest be a little bit higher because from what you see from the headlines versus what we get don't always match up. But we have $5 billion there just from the general fund. So it's tough to give me 5% return on that much. So there's a give and take there. But one of the things that we want to talk about is when we're forecasting and when we're planning how those dollars need to be spent, do we need to hold as much back in reserve, or can we free some of this stuff up, get slightly better returns, go and do some different risky, not risky, but different investment vehicles? So it's not just sitting in an interest-bearing checking account, rather it's sitting into a CDs or a bonds or a fixed income account. Get better returns so we can free up some of that cash to generate better returns for us. And then also just figuring out what is appropriate for us in terms of keeping, what do we need to hold back as a reserve overall so that we have the leverage we need for future obligations. And that's something that really comes down to, some of those big projects, those rainy day, those stabilization funds, some of the areas where, we are very conservative in terms of how we budget and forecast. We like to have cash in the bank before we spend it. And so that's a great thing, and it's kept us out of trouble. But are we keeping too much cash that we're missing upside opportunities elsewhere? And so that's a study that we're bringing in some outside contractors to help us with, that have experience in this realm, that have done this for major multinational corporations, because we aren't really looking at doing cash management like other states. We really want to think more like, a company like Apple, or like somebody that has a lot of different entities, a lot of different areas, and has different financial instruments at play, because we have that unique bank approach and can do stuff different than other states can.
Chad said that question was down in the weeds, but I want to put it in a way that demonstrates that it's really not, because if we can get better at cash management, and now suddenly we could take money that the state of North Dakota already has already taken from taxpayers or in the form of fees or what have you, and we can turn that money into more money with sound investment strategies, that does a lot of things, right? Because money's fungible. So if in one part of the budget we can make that money worth more money by growing it with smart investment strategies, management strategies, then it allows us maybe to cut taxes somewhere else, or not have to raise taxes. Or maybe if there's something we want to do, like, pay for school lunches, well, there's a little bit more money. It gives us flexibility, whatever those policy choices are going to be, and that's up to the legislature and the governor. But whatever those policy choices are going to be, it gives our state more flexibility. It's not down in the weeds, although, Chad, I understand the point you're making.
Right.
But it's important. And I'd rather be talking about this stuff than a lot of the other stuff we tend to talk about in politics. So last question, Thomas. Do you feel like you're going to face a primary challenger? Because I feel like there's a faction of the Republican Party that might like to see you be challenged. And also if you're facing that sort of a challenge, how much do you still think that like competency sells in this political environment right now?
I hope competency sells. I hope that people, deep down still just want to trust that things are, they don't have to worry about stuff, especially when it comes to somebody who's just the keeper of the checkbook for the state, making sure that, you are chasing all those pennies to make sure that we know where the money is actually going. And so I hope competency sells, because this stuff really takes attention to detail. And it doesn't just take the rah-rah, red meat throwing. That sometimes carries the day in other offices. And so I hope that, in terms of a competition, I'm not afraid of it. I'm sure that there's always a little bit of competition. I've had it when I ran in the legislature. I've had it in 2020 when I ran for this. So far, we haven't heard anything. We announced on Wednesday on National Signing Day. Coach Polisek didn't get the memo that I still have 4 years of eligibility. And so, I had to announce for this instead of my commitment to play. And so, we were there, and it was myself and Auditor Gallion and Commissioner Chrisman from the PSC. We all announced over at party headquarters, and our new GOP chairwoman, Sandy Sanford, made the comment. She was asked us by a reporter about if they expect competition, and she said, at this point we haven't heard any competition for any of these guys, and so that's I trust there to hopefully be some transparency on if they start hearing anything, but we'll see what comes over the next few months.
Well, Thomas, I thank you for coming on, and I just want to put out there, if anybody from the Yankees are listening, I'm available as a free agent to play left field. And I couldn't probably be that much worse than the left fielders we were running out last year. No, I could be a lot worse. All right, we're going to put it there. Thomas, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Thomas.
Thank you much, gentlemen. I appreciate it. Look forward to this O-band bump.
Hi there. My name is James Wallner. I produce and host the podcast Dakota Spotlight, a true crime podcast that tackles historical and unsolved crimes in the upper Midwest. Follow along with me as we search for a missing girl, attempt to solve a 45-year-old murder, and much, much more. That's Dakota Spotlight Podcast, anywhere you get your podcasts, or at inforum.com/podcasts.
All right, just finished our interview with Thomas Beadle, who's running for re-election, not afraid of a primary opponent. I think he's probably going to get one. And I would hope, like he said, I hope that competency matters. If listening to him, the man knows what he's doing. He's got a passion for the job he's doing now. I can't point to anything he's done incompetently. As a conservative, I realize that some of the stuff, fighting the ESG stuff, maybe that leaves you cold. I don't know where you're at on that, but whatever. He's a Republican. This is exactly this. He's a young, competent Republican candidate. He should coast. This should not be the sort of person that we're challenging, but I have a feeling that he's gonna have to work for it.
Yeah, here's the deal. I like Thomas Beadle. I think he's exceptionally competent in his job. He cares about his job. You pointed that out. He's a Republican, so he's going to say some things that I disagree with, obviously. But I'm with you for the life of me. What has he done in the last 3 years that would have earned him a challenge from his own party? Nothing.
And when I said work for it, like I don't have a problem with people being challenged. I don't have a problem with making these people work for it. I'm just not understanding. Like we come out and like Thomas Beadle's the problem. Because that's what it's going to be. Anytime it's like, oh, he's a rhino or he's not whatever. But
again, challenge somebody because they're not good at their job or you don't think they're making good decisions. I don't know what Thomas has done in the last 3 years that would make conservatives say, this guy, he's got to go. It just doesn't make sense.
I don't know. Well, let's move on to, I guess I'm closing out the year with kind of a big story with State Representative Nico Rios. A little recap, I guess, if you're listening to this podcast, I'm assuming you're reading my columns too, but in case you need to get caught up, Rios was arrested on December 15th for DUI and other charges. Open container, I think, was one of them. Refusing a chemical test was another one. And Rios himself actually announced it on Twitter. I think that was the first, before the news even broke. He announced it on Twitter that he'd been pulled over. He apologized, gave himself a nice pat on the back for being a straight shooter. But not mentioned in there, in what I was able to reveal by getting the police report and the hour and 15-minute long body cam video from the primary officer who arrested him. Who has a delightful English accent, by the way. That was the one part I did enjoy about it.
Not an accent you'd expect from a Williston PD person.
No, not really. And Rios had a lot to say about it. I just want to say his accent was delightful. I thought he was very professional, did a great job throughout. My 2 cents as a citizen. But Rios, berates this guy. Homophobic slurs, racial comments. Because he focuses it on his accent. At one point, the officer says that he was born in England, and Rios zeroes in on that, saying, your country's being invaded by migrants and refugees, and they're raping your women. And and by the way, not unlike some of the stuff we're hearing from Donald Trump nationally right now about immigrants poisoning the blood of America. That's ugly, ugly stuff. Now, the Republicans think of themselves as a party that backs the blue, which isn't to say that Democrats don't also support law enforcement, but this is part of the Republican brand. They back the blue. And then you have Rios out here behaving. He's calling the officers who were involved in his arrest homophobic slurs, berating them, accusing them of picking on him, accusing him of, at one point he accused the officer of picking on brown people. Rios identifies as he says he's got Mexican heritage. Accuses them of picking on him it goes, and then he tried to play, he tried to give the officers his business card. I'm assuming his legislative business card so that they know. At one point he demanded he wanted his phone so he could call Attorney General Drew Wrigley to complain about the officers, although Wrigley says he never received a call. Look at that. That should be very, very easy to condemn. I published the story yesterday. It's been up nearly 24 hours now. And if there's been an official announcement from the Republican Party or from the governor or from any prominent legislative leadership, I've yet to hear it. I've heard a lot of stuff privately, and I have a column about that up today. I've heard a lot of stuff privately from Republicans say, we don't like this guy, he's an embarrassment, he's not fit to be in office, et cetera, et cetera. And they're all coupled with but that's not on the record.
So, Rob, I want to dig a little bit into this back the blue sort of thing, because I think you are right that generally in our society, Republicans are seen, particularly after some of the Black Lives Matter protests, that it's the Republicans who are, supportive of police officers. I would have thought after January 6th and how the Capitol Police were treated by conservatives, maybe that would have fallen a little bit by the wayside. But after what the Fargo Police Department went through not that long ago, with an officer getting killed in the line of duty, the officer obviously involved in Hazen-Beulah area with Kevin Cramer's son, where they died in the line of duty. And then this, Nico Rios can say all he wants that he supports police officers and whatever. I have a tough time saying Republicans across the board back the blue when I think about January 6th, when I think about what Rios was doing here. Do you know who I am? Stop picking on me. I'm sorry that the police officers are picking on you. Clearly, you could have watched this video for 30 seconds and know he shouldn't have been driving. And as you've pointed out,
and by the way, I should point out, he admitted he's admitted himself that he shouldn't have been driving.
Yeah, well, but in the video, he was lying to the cops, saying he hadn't drank in 6 hours, and there's an open container that was from a few days ago. So he berates them with all these things. He lies to them over and over and over, but somehow he gets to be part of the back the blue side. He gets to be, the conservatives get to be the back the blue thing. I don't think that holds water after January 6th. But watching that video, it was disgusting. I mean, it was absolutely disgusting. And you wrote a column. Other people have gotten DUIs, right? We've watched some of the body cameras with the body camera footage. They never behave like this.
No. So we have. I mean, that's part of this is getting a DUI in and of itself not good. It's news. It needs to be reported. The voters need to be aware of it, and they need to decide. And I mean, let's be honest, getting a DUI, if you're a North Dakota politician, has not been much of a deterrent to getting reelected. I mean, the list is long. We've had a couple statewide officials. We've had, I think Rios is the 10th lawmaker that, by my count, since 2006. I mean, it happens every other year, it seems. So most of them, I mean, it doesn't seem to affect their political careers. They keep, and that's we could spend a whole other podcast talking about that, whether or not that's right. Right. But this was the problem. The problem was he got a DUI. The much larger problem is that I feel like Rios revealed something about himself, right? I mean, maybe the impulse is to say, oh, he was drunk and he made a mistake. Okay. In vino veritas, I think that he got drunk and it pulled the curtain back on his character. I think he revealed something about himself and how he views the world that maybe when he's sober, he would be a lot more guarded about. And again, I'm looking at other Republicans. This should be a layup for condemning this. It should be a layup to call for him to resign from office. I mean, if you watched him speak at the legislature, it was pretty clear he didn't know what was going on. His speeches were unintentionally funny. I mean, to the point where you could hear other lawmakers on the floor laughing at him, and he's standing there smiling, thinking that they're laughing at him. No, they're laughing with him. No, they're laughing at him because he is so clueless and so lost, he doesn't know what's going on. The Republicans in District 23 chose this guy. That's on them. But what's been revealed in that thing, he should resign. Which, by the way, was the statement from the North Dakota Democratic Party, where they're saying, it used to be that when people got caught doing something like this, they resigned. And that's true. There used to be shame involved. But that process can't even start if the leaders of the party, whether it's the party chair, whether it's legislative leadership, whether it's statewide elected officials, if they're not going to say anything, where's the leadership? Where's the shame?
So watching that video last night, and I think April Baumgartner made this connection on Twitter, it reminded me of school board member Emily Eckroth in Bismarck, who was in the back of a police car. She peed her pants, for lack of a better way, on purpose. Her husband was a person who ran for the state Senate as a Republican against sort of the chosen, more the Republican traditional candidate, Sean Cleary. And I will tell you, after that video came out about Emily Eckroth, there were a lot of people who were Republicans who were calling for her to resign. They were calling for her to resign. It was a nonpartisan office, and maybe she was married to a guy who sort of took on the establishment a little bit. I don't hear those people calling for Nico Rios.
Well, Nico Rios did plenty to take on the establishment. I mean, the guy was taking pot shots at Congressman Kelly Armstrong. I mean, he's on Twitter saying that he should face a primary challenger, making jokes, and I mean, he rips on Doug Burgum all the time.
But he's a Republican legislator, right? I mean, he is at the end of the day, even though he's out of in that sort of thing.
Sure.
I think your overall point that this should be a layup to condemn this behavior. Again, you got the DUI. That's something that happens. It's terrible. It's very dangerous.
We're not making any excuses for that.
Yes. But once you start making the racial, homophobic, and again, don't you know who I am? Yeah. I mean, the suggestion that somehow he's above the law or these cops are going to pay for holding him to account for breaking the law is unacceptable. And Mike LaFleur should be calling out this behavior. The governor should be calling out this behavior. I think I agree with you that Representative Rios should resign after this. This should be embarrassing enough so he resigns, like Emily Eckroth ended up doing. I mean,
although she fought it.
Oh, what's that?
She fought it.
Oh, she fought, but eventually she did resign on her own. I mean, there's a recall effort that was put into place. But, I mean, this isn't a situation where in District 23, the Democrats are going to be able to recall this guy. It's a district that's 85% Republican. This is a Republican problem that they're going to have to figure out. But, I mean, the bigger problem here is they've got to stop being scared of doing what's right.
Yeah. So
at some point, holding on to your office is less important than doing what's right for the citizens of North Dakota. And this whole follow the being afraid of the activists in your own party, then you need to be thinking about who you're associating with if you're afraid of them.
That was the point. That was the point that I made in my column about this, talking about how, I mean, that's it. They're afraid. They don't want to say anything because Nico Rios is part of. Did you know Rios, by the way, apparently was a staffer for Ted Cruz at one point?
I did know that. When he announced as a candidate, I remember a lot of people were sort of chirping about that.
I just learned that. I didn't know that about him. It surprises me. I didn't think somebody like that would be on a Washington staff. Who knows? But he he's very much a part of the North Dakota Young Republicans. He's in with the Brandon Pritchards, and some of these others who see themselves as the future of the party. And they're backed by, sort of the MAGA movement, where you see Jared Hendricks, who's an former district chair in Minot, now a district chair in the Fargo area, chairman of the term limits. He's kind of an organizer who's been pushing a lot of, the populist activists out to district conventions. And I got to tell you, the traditional Republicans, whatever you want to say, whatever term you want to use for them, they're afraid of them. They don't want to deal with that. And that leads them to the point where they're not going to say anything about Nico Rios. And it's the same on a much different scale. It's the same reason they don't want to say anything about Donald Trump. When Donald Trump does things that are demonstrably wrong, such as the recent news article where Donald Trump and RNC chairwoman Ronna McDaniel are calling election officials in Michigan to talk them out of not voting to certify the not certifying the election in that state. I mean, or you have Donald Trump saying the whole, poisoning our blood thing. However you feel about illegal immigration, and listen, I think Republicans, I think even Joe Biden at this point has admitted we've got a mess at the southern border. But to say that people who are coming to our country, and I don't think Donald Trump just meant illegal immigrants, but to say that people coming to our country are poisoning our blood is a repugnant thing to say. It's echoes of things that we heard from the Nazi regime in Germany, and I mean it should be condemned. I mean, Donald Trump himself, his grandfather was from Bavaria, his mother was from Scotland, his first wife was from Czechoslovakia. His current wife is from Yugoslavia. I realize the countries they were from don't exist anymore, but that's where they were when they were born.
Yeah.
I mean, but now immigrants, I mean, these are easy things to condemn, should be easy things to condemn, but the Republicans are so busy being afraid of their base, they don't want to do the right thing.
But Rob, I assume you, like me and people around me, hear from traditional Republicans during the legislative session, I wish we didn't have to deal with these crazy bills. I wish we didn't have to deal with these crazy legislators. I wish, this isn't the Republican Party that I signed up for. Well, guess what? What happened this week, and you not responding or saying anything, saying that this is inappropriate or saying that this guy should resign, that's what leads to the stuff that happens during the session and the things that you don't want to deal with. I'm also tired of traditional Republicans saying, oh, I wish I didn't have to vote this way on book bans or whatever those things are. That's not how I feel, but I have to vote that way if I want to maintain my seat. At some point, just do what's right on these things. And there's a lot of really, really good Republicans. Those people that are texting you, Rob, those are really good legislators. Those are really good people. But they have to step up. They have to step up in this situation, or else this snowball of what we're seeing in North Dakota of sort of this fringe element taking over the state and taking over the legislature is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And spending $1 million on mail pieces and TV commercials and primaries isn't going to turn it around. At some point, people need to step up and say what's right and wrong.
You have to say it's wrong. It is wrong that they're doing these things. It is wrong that they're saying these things. And if you don't say it, you leave a vacuum, right? I mean, they say, oh, well, they don't represent the Republican Party. They don't represent the party that I joined. Okay, but here's the thing. If you have a Representative Brandon Pritchard who's on Twitter saying that Sodom and Gomorrah should be our LGBTQ curriculum in schools, if you have, lawmakers saying that librarians and teachers are groomers and stuff, and if you have Nico Rios, using homophobic slurs against a police officer and trying to assert his authority as a first-term state lawmaker to get out of a DUI, If you're silent, then that's the voice of the Republican Party. Okay,
Rob, could you imagine if Nico Rios was a Democrat, what those same traditional Republicans would be saying right now?
I will tell you that I would have written the exact same column.
Right. I guarantee these people would not have been quiet.
No. I mean, you would have Nico Rios on Twitter dunking on that Democrat and gleefully sharing the video and screenshots from it, much as people are doing to him right now, and rightfully so, by the way. It's a shameful thing that he did, and he deserves to have it ridiculed.
And Rob, you mentioned that, maybe the fact that he'd had some booze led to him being a little more honest. This is sort of the real person. We don't even have to theorize that. You've got the text chain from that young Republican group where they're using homophobic slurs and all these different things like it's just fine. And I don't know if Nico is part of those things, but his ilk certainly was. And for some reason, that's just acceptable. And speaking that way about human beings. And again, attacking police officers, back the blue. I mean, I remember Drew Wrigley standing up at the press concerts in Fargo and saying, back the blue, always back the blue.
Okay.
Unless you're Nico Rios.
Here's your chance. Or unless condemning somebody like Nico Rios might earn you a primary challenge that you don't want to deal with. And I mean, part of it too is this is coming from the bottom up too. I mean, right. We need leadership on this from the top down. But I mean, a lot of this is coming from the bottom up. And I think there's this notion that, to be a successful, you have to be led around by the nose by voters. No, sometimes the voters need to be told they're wrong, or at least the faction of voters that are supporting people like this, they just need to be told they're wrong.
But Rob, let's think about this logically. These traditional Republicans who are afraid of a primary think by saying, I condemn somebody telling a cop that he's an effing F word, whatever it was, is wrong. And they think the voters of their party will vote them out for doing that? What does that say about the voters then?
It says that our priorities are completely up. I mean, that's the point I'm making. A lot of this problem is starting in the base. And it means that the priorities of those voters are completely upside down. I don't understand how we've gotten. I can understand you're supporting policies. I can even understand you're supporting a lot of the policies that were implemented during the Trump administration. A lot of those policies, they're defensible questions. We can have good debates about them. I don't understand why supporting that agenda also means you have to condone this behavior.
Rob, I don't believe the Republican primaries voters in North Dakota would vote somebody out because they condemn somebody for calling cops names, treating police officers like that. I don't believe that. And I wish I could be proven right by somebody standing up and condemning this and leading to a primary challenge. But I don't believe that the Republicans I see every single day in Bismarck, North Dakota, they're going to be disgusted by this. They are disgusted by this. So, if you're afraid of the 100 people that are showing up at your Republican convention, then beat them at the primary by doing the right thing. I think by and large, people want elected leaders who will stand up and do the right thing, and they need to stop being afraid of this. What did Becker get in the last election, Rob? 20-some%?
Less than 19 point something, I believe.
That's what we're talking about. It's 19% of the voters, maybe less than that. But why are we letting them determine right and wrong? And not doing what's right, and then let the voters decide what's right and wrong. Well, I don't get it. I don't get it.
The thing I hear over and over is people saying, "I just don't want to deal with it anymore." And I think that it's across the spectrum. I think it's why a lot of good lawmakers aren't going to run for re-election this year, because they don't want to deal with it anymore. I think it's why a county auditor in Eddy County resigned after being harassed basically by local election conspiracy theorists. She didn't want to deal with it anymore. I think it's why a lot of traditional Republicans aren't showing up to their district meetings anymore to become, maybe sit on the executive committee of their district, or to be delegates to conventions or what have you, because they don't want to deal with it anymore. But I'm telling you, every one of you who gives up, every one of you who doesn't run for re-election, who doesn't go to the meeting, who doesn't show up, you're leaving a vacuum. And on an individual basis, I understand. I get it. We've all got lives. We've got children. I would rather hang out with my kids and play a board game or read a book or watch a movie with my wife than go deal with some toothache down at the local district convention. I get it on a personal level. But when we're doing it en masse and you're not showing up, you're leaving a vacuum, and look who's filling it.
Yep, you have to, and it's the right and the left, right? I mean, in right, it's it's just a bigger group, but the same thing happens on the left as well. I mean, you have a certain segment of people who have the time, have the energy to go to these meetings and participate in things, but at some point, these folks that are in leadership positions, it has to come down to just standing up for what's good. And in this case, standing up for the Williston PD is what's good, and it shouldn't be a hard call. This isn't a borderline ball or strike, Rob. This isn't a bang play at first.
Well, think if you're that patrol officer right now who has probably read my article. I mean, I don't know. I haven't spoken to him. His report and the video speaks for itself. I have no idea what that guy's politics are. I don't know anything about him other than he's from England and he has a delightful accent. I don't know anything about those officers. But I imagine that they're probably reading the column, and they're looking at the absolute silence from North Dakota's governing majority of Republicans and wondering, okay, that's where they're at. When it comes down and somebody tries to pull rank and tries to invoke the Attorney General's name and then uses horrendous language and berates me for 45 minutes while I'm driving this guy to the Williams County Correctional Center, that's where they're at,
Yep. And the don't you know who I am business card sort of thing. I mean, it's it's suggesting that he and potentially other lawmakers think they're above the law.
Right.
and that the same rules don't apply to them as they apply to other people.
Even if none of the other comments had happened, like even if none of the homophobic comments or the racist comments and the abusive language, even if none of the rest of that had happened and he had just tried that, that's enough for you to resign. If you think that your political office gives you the right to get out of a DUI, the right to get out of something that any other North Dakotan would have to go through the process for and hire an attorney and do all of that and face the consequences, if you believe that about yourself, you have no business in elected office.
And the idea that, he was suggesting the police officers were picking on him. I mean, he kept using that term as like a playground. Stop picking on me. Or I'm only 2 blocks from my house. Therefore, you guys are being unreasonable.
At one point,
then wanting to drive his truck home after getting, a DUI. It was bizarre.
He also asked the officer to turn off his body cam at one point. He also said, one of the first things he said when he starts getting a little belligerent, he says, if you guys are trying to ruin me or destroy me, and then the officers like interrupt him and tell him to get back to doing the field sobriety test. But that was kind of where his mind was at, was like, this was some sort of a plot out to get Nico Rios. I doubt those officers knew who he was.
Not a chance.
They had no clue, and they didn't care. It was hilarious when he offers his business card to the officer, and the officer says, I don't want your business card, buddy. I want your registration. That was gold. Kudos to you, officer. By the way, he's just doing his job. But kudos to him.
And they didn't. They could have responded very angrily, and they kept their cool the whole time as he was berating them, and
they were completely professional. They were a couple of cops doing their job. Now they've got some spotlight on them. I hope everybody looks at that spotlight and sees a couple of fine public servants who did their jobs well, while an elected official was being a word that I'm not going to use on the podcast. So that's where it's at. This is an easy layup. It's not like this is some 6-term influential. Not that it should be different in that situation, right? This is a first-term lawmaker. First term.
Rob, what's the likelihood this guy resigns? Close to 0.
Well, yeah. I don't see. Could he be recalled? I don't know. That's up to the people of District 23. I'm just very, very worried that this sort of thing doesn't matter to Republicans right now. And it makes me sick to my stomach. We could say some things about Democrats, about Bob Menendez in the United States Senate and whether or not, there's enough accountability for him. We could talk about some of those other things. We could do the what about it game, but it doesn't matter. We have here, in this situation, what are you going to do? If you're a Republican, why hasn't your party condemned this?
Yeah, and we know, you talk about Bob Menendez. He's currently has a hold on a couple appointments from the president that really irritate me. But we saw Fetterman. Fetterman's been going after Menendez like nobody's business.
That's true.
That's a U.S. senator going after a U.S. senator. Where are you, North Dakota House members?
Yeah. I don't know. All right, so we're going to put a pin in it there. Thank you so much for listening. This has been a great year for the podcast. It's really been going great. Thank you so much for those of you who have left ratings or whatever on the pod. Those really help if you leave and give us an honest review and give us some stars, whatever you think is appropriate. That's really a big deal. We really appreciate that. It helps. I guess in the algorithms. It helps the podcast be found easier by maybe people who are interested in our little corner of American politics. So I certainly appreciate that. All the nice emails. I get emails regularly, obviously for what I'm writing, but I get a lot from people who
forward me any nice emails. Did you ever get things that
they're never about you? They're always very mean about you. So I never share those. It turns out
this O-band bump might just in my head after all.
No, it's not, Chad. It's absolutely the truth. We'll never let that go. I don't know. I do really appreciate everybody tuning in. It's a lot of fun doing this. The subject matter sometimes isn't very fun. But it's a real treat to get to do this. I'm so thankful that Chad and Ben agree to do it with me every week. So it's been a lot of fun. Thank you for listening. And of course, we'll talk again. We'll see you in the new year. Did you know Forum Communications Company has a robust podcast library? At inforum.com/podcasts, we have everything from politics, sports, true crime, outdoor adventure, and more. Visit inforum.com/podcasts and explore them all today.